Hi, I'm Sandra Jones, a lawyer for the Scott Klein Foundation.
Hi, I'm Fish, Tuna Fish, an economist of the Scott Klein Foundation.
I'm Gillian Finn.
And I'm Marlene Rain.
And we're environmental scientists for the Scott Klein Foundation.
All right, so let's get the debate started by doing our summaries. Hey, Marlene, why don't you start off?
All right, well everyone, Asian carp are considered invasive, as they do well in a variety of habitats, reproduce quickly, and can easily disperse. As such, they present a great danger to the Great Lakes ecosystem. Asian carp are planktivores, and they feed on phytoplankton and zooplankton. They outcompete other native fish species, such as bluegill and gizzard shad, for food. Researchers predict that Asian carp will cause a decrease in the population of native planktivores if these fish end up in the Great Lakes. This will greatly disrupt the food web of the Great Lakes. We cannot wait until this becomes an issue to fix it. Being an R-selected species, Asian carp will begin reproducing rapidly once in the Great Lakes, and will spread throughout the entire lake system. It will become nearly impossible to erase the damage. Therefore, we should close the waterway to prevent ecological damage.
Unbelievable! Sandra Jones, please give us your summary.
All right. Agreements between the Great Lakes states and 2 Canadian provinces has made the preservation of the Great Lakes ecosystem a priority. However, Great Lakes states besides Illinois disagree with Illinois' implementation of these agreements between the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement and the Great Lakes Compact. Legally, Illinois isn't necessarily for shutting down the canal according to both of these at present time, but is currently responsible for implementing a program to regulate the different aspects of each agreement, one of these being aquatic invasive species and local ecosystem. There is also a current lack of cohesive federal law in terms of invasive species, according to a 2013 Congressional Research Service document. In respect to every aspect of life, the law is the law, and at this point in time, the law doesn't require much of Illinois beyond what is already being done, especially when looking at precedents and court rulings.
Thank you for sharing, Sandra. All right, so I'll say it again. My name is Tuna Fish, and as an economist, my concern lies in the jobs of our nation's citizens. I want to keep the waterway open. After all, 60% of our nation's crops are shipped on this waterway. The Midwest's economy would collapse without it, and thousands would lose their jobs. I'm not a bad guy. That's why I focused my research on NESP, the Navigation and Ecosystem Sustainability Program. It works hand in hand with the environment to get rid of invasive species and conserve native species. The problem is that very few steps have been taken to implement NESP. I want to show my opponents why NESP is the right answer and help them reach a state where we can start implementing it immediately.
Thank you, Tuna.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Sandra. One duty of the U.S. government is to provide for the general welfare of the nation. If Asian carp would harm the environment in the Great Lakes, which is an important factor in the lives of many Americans, doesn't the U.S. government have a duty to close the Chicago Channel?
Thanks for the question, Gil. The Illinois state government does have responsibility for the negative effects of the canal according to compacts and agreements formed between the Great Lakes states and 2 Canadian provinces. However, the federal government believes themselves to have less jurisdiction in this area and has abstained from ruling in favor of closing the canal, specifically in the case of 3 years of court cases from 2010 to 2012, with only 1 court ruling in favor of the Great Lakes states and with a preliminary injunction being denied. However, there has been a controversy on this issue because the current president is from Chicago, so some believe that this may have induced a bias of some sort, although with the Supreme Court cases, I don't especially see how this is likely. But despite that, the lack of action on behalf of the Illinois federal governments could be attributed to B2 of Annex 6 in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, where it stated that the parties, Great Lakes states and Canada provinces, implement programs to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species, then listing how to go about this process. In this way, Illinois has complied by creating electronic barriers and inspecting the canal. As well as this, even if the U.S. government does have a duty to close the Chicago Canal, it would be difficult because of a lack of comprehensive legislation on how to treat the invasive species. It's currently a multitude of laws, regulations, programs, and policies that are narrowly focused or too general, only focused on one species or what it affects, or only slightly addressing the invasive species at the edges. All of this coming from the 2013 Congressional Research Service's report on the topic.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Tuna, is there any way that Asian carp could be useful to the economy?
You know, that's a great question, Sandra. And my answer is that Asian carp are an economic gold mine. They're very low in toxicity due to the fact that they're planktivores. Asian carp are much safer to eat because they're less likely to harbor dangerous toxins. And the sheer amount of Asian carp means that they're easy to catch. More fishermen making catches means that more fish will be sold and more fish will be available on the market. The problem in this case becomes our solution and is one of the primary reasons I believe that the waterway should remain open. Alright, now I have a question to ask of you guys, the environmental scientists of the Scott Klein Foundation. If you close the canal, 60% of US's crops will have no way to be shipped. The Midwest's economy will crash. How do you propose making up for this cost?
That's an excellent question, Tuna. We understand that the Midwest economy is reliant on the waterway for the transportation of grains and other goods. So we propose that the waterway gets shut down and is replaced with a rail line, which is a sustainable alternative to transporting goods by boat, and that can allow us to keep Asian carp from damaging the Great Lakes ecosystem, which would also cause great economic harm. Barges get 514 miles per gallon, and freight trains get 436 miles per gallon. So barges are only slightly more efficient on average than trains.
So tuna. Asian carp would decrease the populations of native fish species through competition. The decreases in these populations of smaller fish would take away the food sources of bigger game fish, decreasing their populations. This could hurt the fishing industry very much. Wouldn't the cost of closing the channel be worth it to prevent the devastation of this industry in the Great Lakes?
Marlene! You hit the nail on the head! It would be terrible to let the Asian carp into the Great Lakes. In fact, you've given me an opportunity to talk a little more about NESP. NESP's conservation plan has multiple steps. First, the Upper Mississippi River Conservation Committee identifies the species that needs to be conserved and implements their research. Afterwards, they increase public awareness and then develop creative partnerships with alumni, academic, government, and private organizations to document the issues and prescribe a strategic plan of action. That's why my plan, NESP, will allow us to conserve native species while keeping the waterway open. Since NESP has already been passed, it will cost a lot less to set the conservation plan into action rather than to start a whole new project that will make Congress-approved one redundant.
I have a question for the environmental consultants now. Although Illinois should legally close the canal due to the Great Lakes Compact and the Great Lakes Water Agreement, couldn't damage be done to the canal and the Great Lakes ecosystems? As to be effective, it's likely the barrier would need to be as close to the lake as possible by basically having all the negative effects of a dam, which is to say restricting water flow and movement as well as the bed of the canal being damaged.
You know, that's a good question, but although we understand there could be concerns about the impacts of closing the channel, it's very important to remember that this is a man-made channel. The Great Lakes were functioning just fine before the barrier was ever built. Better even. So they should be able to function after it's closed as well. Closing it would actually be one step closer to restoring it to its original state, which is a good thing.
Thank you. Now I have another question, which is how legal the current system of preventing carp from getting into Lake Michigan is and how effective it is as well.
That's a good question. Currently, there's actually a system of electric barriers in place to prevent Asian carp from reaching the Great Lakes. While this system may be legal, it's really not ethical. According to the patents on the electric barriers, when fish try to cross the barriers, they actually experience narcosis and or tetany. So basically they're in they basically become unconscious or they have the effects of an electric shock. Like they'll begin shaking and spasming. And this not only affects Asian carp, but also affects all other aquatic organisms that try to pass through the barrier. So by closing the waterway, it would get rid of these unethical electrical barriers that not only harm Asian carp, but harm other organisms as well.
We really shouldn't be harming any living creature like this.
Alright, well, I have one final question for our good friend Sandra. And that question is, how can Congress work to implement NESP as fast as possible? What steps can Congress take? Because, NESP is a pretty great program, and we really need to get started on this.
Sorry to kind of shoot you down, Tuna, but I have to start out by saying that NESP is a convoluted issue to say the least. In my research, I found sources discussing how it's not very beneficial to the environment and quite expensive. With it appears Congress hasn't allotted funds to NESP since 2011. Of course, if Congress were to start to implement NESP quickly, they need to start by allocating funds to it. Of course, suspicions about its detrimental effects to the environment should also be investigated before implementations.
That's true.
I think we need to take a break, guys, and come to a conclusion about what we really need to do.
I
I
agree.
feel like
Perhaps-
Tuna has some words about the downfall of NESP, though, it appears.
Perhaps NESP isn't as great as I always thought it was.
It's alright,
Sandra?
Tuna.
Alright, Tuna.
We
Marty?
understand.
We're going to come up with
Gil?
an even better solution on our own.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Tuna.
Alright, we have decided that the best response to this issue would be to close the waterway before Asian carp become a serious ecological problem in the Great Lakes. The current system of electrical barriers is unethical, and Asian carp, once in the Great Lakes, will wreak havoc on its ecosystem. We understand that the waterway is an important shipping corridor used to ship about 60% of the nation's grains. To make up for this,
True.
we present that the waterway should be replaced with a rail line, which is only slightly less fuel efficient than barges. This proposal would also meet legal restrictions due to the agreements and compacts that the state of Illinois has entered into, as well as the precedents set by the U.S. government in the 1929 case of Wisconsin versus Illinois. In conclusion, closing the waterway and replacing it with a rail line is the best response in an environmental, economic, and legal sense.
I never thought I would agree with you on this, but I think you're right. Does anyone have any final words on this matter? I think I've learned a lot today, all thanks to you guys.
I agree.
You
I
too,
think
Tuna.
this has been a really productive discussion, and I think we've come to a good consensus about what to do about this issue. It was wonderful to meet with you all and discuss this.
You too, Marlene. Sorry, Marlene.
It's okay, I get it all the time.
Sandra, I think I know a really fitting last name for you. Sandra Dollar.
Sure, Tuna.
Whatever you say.